So hello again, everyone. Charles Banfield here with another Karate Canucks conversation. And this time it's my pleasure to be joined by a husband and wife team, Sensei Theresa and Sensei David Griffin. And this is another first for this podcast. So I've never had a husband and wife on here, let alone husband and wife national champions on here before. So I'll start right with a little bit of a background, and we'll get into some questions and answers here. So starting with Sensei David Griffin, he began his martial arts journey in 1972 when he started training in Chito-Ryu Karate under several Q belts in the Halifax, Nova Scotia area, because there were no black belts in the area at the time. 3 years later, he earned his first degree black belts, also Sho-dan, from Sensei Shane Higashi, as well as a spot on the Nova Scotia provincial team that competed at the National Karate Association Canadian Championships in 1975. Moving forward to 1981, as a second degree black belt, he founded the Windsor Karate Club in Windsor, Nova Scotia, which is still running today. And now as a 6th degree black belt in Shito-Ryu, not Chito, but Shito-Ryu Karate. Over the various years of his career, Sensei Griffin has competed, coached, and officiated provincially, nationally, and internationally, while amassing several awards and titles, and some of which include national champion, head coach, Provincial Technical Director, Provincial Chief Referee, World Karate Federation A-level judge, and Sportsman of the Year, Coach of the Year, and Official of the Year, 3 separate occasions from the National Karate Association, which is now known as Karate Canada. And we're also joined by Sensei Theresa Griffin. She started her career in 1981 when she began training in Shotokan Karate by joining the Sochin Karate Club in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia under Sensei Ron Fagan, who's a previous guest on this podcast. Fast forward to 1986, she competed at the National Karate Championships for the first time as a blue belt, and a year later as a brown belt, she would win a silver medal in Kumite at the National Championships. In 1988, which was a capstone year for Theresa Sensei, she would earn her first degree black belts in Chito-Ryu from Sensei Shane Higashi. She would take home the gold medal at the Canadian National Championships and earn a spot on the national team, which competed at the World Karate Championships in Cairo, Egypt. And in doing so, she became the first woman from Nova Scotia to compete at the World Karate Championships. And like Sensei David Griffin, over the years, she would earn several awards and titles, including first female coach at the National Karate Association, World Chito-Ryu Soke Cup champion, National Karate Association's Sportsman of the Year, and her 3rd degree black belt in Shito-Ryu Karate. So that's 3 different styles she's got experience in. And also, most importantly, the title of mom three times over in 1989, 1991, and 1994. Senseis David and Theresa first met in 1982 at a karate training camp, and since then their personal and martial arts paths have been intertwined, and they are now the co-instructors at the Windsor Karate Club in Nova Scotia's Annapolis Valley. So welcome, Senseis Griffin and Griffin. It's a pleasure to have you as guests today on this podcast.
Thank you, Charles. Nice to meet you.
Yes, likewise. So, as you know, you and others who have seen this podcast before, it's a very casual affair, and it's just some, I'll start with some softball questions, and you can knock them out of the park, or however you want to answer them. So, usually we just start with some general background as to where you're from and what prompted you to start your martial arts journey.
I guess back in the early 70s, late 60s, I watched this movie called Billy Jack. And I was just amazed. It was intrigued with the skills that you know, people kicking people in the face and jumping over park benches and kicking people. It was just, I was just intrigued as a 13, 14-year-old. This was just absolutely amazing. So I decided that at that point I wanted to get involved in that. Unfortunately, there was nothing around their area until 1972, when this chap who was training at the Atlantic Karate Club in Halifax opened a club at the community center in our area. So I was one of the first people to sign up when it opened its doors. After that, I think the reasons that you start karate are never the same reasons that you remain in karate, and that was certainly the case for me.
Well, Billy Jack was who did it, eh?
Yeah, Billy Jack was from, Tom Laughlin, I guess.
Tom Laughlin, yeah. Excellent. So, and so you're from the greater Halifax area. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, that's right. I grew up in Hatchet Lake, outside Halifax. Family moved into the city in the 70s, mid 70s, and then moved to Dartmouth. Basically around the province throughout my life. I've never lived anywhere else.
Okay, great, thanks. And Sensei Theresa, how about you? What prompted you in 1982 to enter a dojo?
The thing that prompted me was I was always involved with sports. All through high school, I played a lot of sports, and anytime I saw something that I took an interest to that, and I decided I'd seen a group of martial arts training outside, I believe it was, and I kind of looked around my neighborhood to try to find out where they belonged, because they weren't training at the church they did belong, and it took me a little while to get there, but eventually I found them, and I started the martial arts training and really enjoyed it.
So did you go on your own, or was it were you with a group of friends, or were you prompted by anybody to do it, or did you just seek it out completely on your own?
I did have some friends that were interested, but when it came right down to it, I went by myself.
You went by yourself. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't want to come along when it was actual day to start. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So who then, in the introduction, I listed off, for you, Theresa, I listed off Sensei Ron Fagan as your first instructor. For both of you, who would you say would be your key instructors or influencers that you've interacted with throughout your martial arts career?
You go ahead.
Mine was your question.
Oh, mine? Okay. Yeah. For me, it's basically, I met Dave shortly after. We met at a training camp in 1982. So my martial arts has basically been alongside of him. Even though when we married, I stayed with the Shito-Ryu Club because I had so many friendships there. Mm-hmm. And eventually, we were living in Sackville, and he was going to Windsor, and I was going to Dartmouth. So eventually, I made the switch over. And so it's mostly, there's been lots of people that have involved, but we've kind of.
It was a logistical question for us, for her to start training, work together. Though we were both doing different styles and different clubs, but it just became more convenient for her to change styles and come with me. So like I say, we were going in different directions on the same nights, and it was quite pandemonium.
Yeah. So I guess same question for you, David. Who would you say were your key instructors or influencers over the years?
I had several. I would say the probably the most significant ones were Sensei Higashi was very prominent in my early years, and I attribute a lot to him. I have made a lot of friends at the Atlantic Club and in Chito-Ryu, Nova Scotia. And they were very good influence, and that was part of why I think I stayed in karate was the friendships that I developed with people. Then of course one of the very big and a very important influence in my life was Sensei Kutagawa. He was a very prominent figure in my martial arts training. And then later I would meet Sensei Tanzade and start training with him. And yeah, so we're currently with the World Shito-Ryu Karate Federation under Sensei Tanzade, and he's a big part of our organization now. And but throughout the years, like I say, I just can't. I hate to name people because you forget somebody, but there's been a lot of great people, a lot of great friends, and there's a lot to do with why I stayed in karate as long as I did.
Yeah. How about students that have made a mark? Like any of your students that you would highlight as, they've gone on to great things at the national level or internationally?
We've had a lot of students come and go over the years. We've had a lot on the provincial team. We were many students have medals at national championships. We were at a time when we had I forget when it was, but we had a medal every year. It was quite a stretch from starting from the mid '80s to I think maybe the early 2000s or something. There was a medal from our club. Somebody from our club medal at the national championship every year. So, but of course, Theresa, she was a big, she was a big part of our club and a big part of the success and the personal successes that came out of our club as well.
Yeah. So back to Theresa again. When you first competed at the national championships, you were Shotokan training then, or had you made the switch at that point?
I believe I was for the first one. Yeah.
Shotokan.
Yes. Yeah.
When you were blue belts.
Blue belt. That's right.
Okay. I'm just trying to piece together, I guess, the timeline and the stripes, I guess, that go with each one. Okay. So, you've both been training for a few decades, and I'm always curious because I came to I've been involved with martial arts and combat sports for over 30 years, but I came to karate late. Like I was almost 40 when I started training in karate, and like you, Theresa, I started in Shotokan and then switched over to Chito-Ryu some years later. And so for me, the training, the style of training hasn't changed that much, at least from what I can recall. But I'm curious as to what it would be like, what it was like back in the 70s when you would have first started, David, and again in the 80s for you, Theresa, and how the training has evolved based, now versus how when you first started.
Yeah, and I would say the big part of it is the skill level of the participants and skill levels of the instructors. When I first started training, our top person in our club was a brown belt, and so although at the time they seemed like they were gods, and you treated them like they were, they walked on water, but in retrospect, they were brown belts, and you see that now with a little more perspective. And again, when Sensei Higashi started coming to Nova Scotia around that time, I think his rank was second or third Dan. So, you know, we had all kinds of enthusiasm. We worked hard, we trained hard, we ran big push-ups, you know. But I think we really lacked on technical skills. You know, we didn't have the technical training that we have these days, and the technical background. We made up for it in enthusiasm and work ethic, but we just didn't have the technical skills that they use now. And you can see the evolution of karate through the sport, and how it's changed over the years, and how it's become more dynamic, faster. It just I think that's a pretty good indication of, and a good comparison how we trained back then to how we train now, and it gives you a good snapshot of that.
And how about for you, Theresa? Have you noticed? I guess it would be a similar answer, I'm assuming, but have there been any major changes in the way that practice was done versus now, or has it been more or less the same for you?
Yeah. Oh, I would agree with everything that Dave said along, but back in the early days, for me as a woman, there was not very many women around. So I've seen the whole dynamics, and even juniors. We didn't have a lot of juniors back in the day. It was mostly adults. Mm-hmm. And for all my fighting practice and skills was mostly with men. There were a few women around, but not like there is today with the skill level of the women. I found, so for a lot of years we didn't have a junior team. It was just adults. And then over the last 20 or 25, 30 years, we've had our juniors and our adults. And one thing I have noticed as karate has evolved, we have a lot of females. Like, I think right now our dojo is probably over 50% female.
Yeah, 50-50.
Yeah, 50-50. We've got some great, we have great males and great females, but it's really nice to see there are a lot of women involved in karate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And it would make sense, if something is becoming more and more accepted and popular, that it would, attract both sides of the population.
It's interesting too, the shift, how it shifted when back in early days, it was predominantly adults that were training, and now it's predominantly juniors. So it's been a complete about face. Our competitions now, you have to have. You're lucky if you get 5 or 6, or maybe people in a seniors division. And whereas 20, 30 years ago, you would have 20, 30 people in the seniors division. Now it's the other way around. You have a very small group of seniors competing, and just tons and tons of juniors and kids competing. So the demographic is completely turned around from what it used to be.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Yeah, a lot more protective gear. Years ago, we just had the little white knuckle pads. We didn't wear chest protectors.
We didn't wear
anything. Yeah, we didn't wear anything. Just when I started was the little white thing. And no weight divisions. We fought everybody, like in the women's until 19.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Okay. 88 maybe. Yeah. After the Halifax National. Yeah, but for the first few years of me competing, it was all the women together. I'm not sure about the men, but we were all one division, so you fought a lot of fights. Yeah, and the men might have had a couple of divisions. I don't quite remember.
That came later on. I think it was in the early '80s they started with the weight division, but from the '70s to the early '80s, it was all one division for men altogether.
when I said the women's in the 90s, it wasn't in the 90s, it would have been in the 80s, probably 87. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I saw there was something that popped up in the on Facebook. I think it was Karate Nova Scotia, and they had some vintage photos, or they were called vintage photos, from, I guess, back in the 80s. And I think there was a photo of you in competition, Theresa, with the knuckle dusters on. And I was surprised to see that, because, you know, the hands were, all the fingers were exposed and everything else, right? So it was, yeah, it was certainly different then. Would you say that it was treated as a sport back then? Like, because now it's certainly seen as a sport. Like, it's in the Olympics, or it was in the past Olympics. It's reached the pinnacle there. But back in the 70s, 80s, would you say karate was a sport, or would you call it something else?
I think it was an evolution. It was an evolutionary process. It became increasingly more athletic as time went on, and the athletic requirements to compete became more stringent and more a requirement. Whereas in the beginning, it was quite common to see somebody would have they'd do their match, and then they'd step outside for a smoke. Not me, but this is pretty common. It wasn't. The timing of the matches, they were shorter. They were 2 minutes running time, so the amount of time that you were actually competing was shorter. So I think it was. Everybody took it very seriously, but the athleticism really developed in the last 20 years.
Yeah, and would you say it was like? Would you say it's now as I don't want to use the word brutal, but some people have back in the golden era, if you will, the 70s and 80s of karate in North America. There's a lot of blood left on the mat. Whereas today it's almost sanitized. You still get you'll still find somebody getting cracked and split a lip or black eye or whichever, but it's far less prevalent from what I understand, from what it was like back then.
You had injuries, but they were different type of injuries because your protection, your gloves weren't that much protection, and there was no protection on the feet at all. So you would get cuts. You'd have broken noses, cuts, facial contusions, broken ribs, you could have some serious injuries, but I think you don't see as much now, I would say, but it has more to do with the protective equipment.
Yeah.
And now, that being said, there was supposed to be no contact back then too, but that was the theory anyway. Mm-hmm. So that had a lot to do with why it kept the injuries, it minimized the injuries, but when somebody got hit, they got hit, and there was a serious injury. But just the frequency wasn't there.
Yeah, and the rules would have changed too, I guess, right? Instead of just wiping it off and you're fine, it would be, or that's what it was like back then, at least from the stories that.
Yeah, you just shook it off and got out there. Yeah.
So the rules changing, the change in the rules, I think have made a big influence, I guess, on how how the competitions are.
And better
executed these days.
I say much better officiating nowadays, right? Which really helps.
Yeah.
The training for officiating has really improved. I think, and I still think, there's areas and pockets of that don't take it very seriously. But I think the culture in officiating has changed. And people are taking it more seriously, and they're studying the process more thoroughly, and they're getting into it, and they're trying to be better as officials. Back in the day, people just say, "Oh, you were black belt. Oh, come out to the tournament, put a suit on, and you can help officiate." And that's how they recruited judges and officials. It was like by some magical process of osmosis, you learn to be a judge and official just because you were a black belt. And although, that being said, there's still some people who think that way, but I think it's improved immensely.
Back to I guess, David, when you were talking before about when you first started training in karate, and you were sharing with me before we started recording that your first instructor was an orange belt, and then you moved to another place that had some brown belts and so on. So if there were no black belts that were there to teach and found the schools and so on, where were these Q belts coming from? Like, they must have been getting their training from somewhere else and moving, or were they just where did they come from? I'm curious.
Most of the at the time, I think the only club in Nova Scotia that was the Atlantic Karate Club, so they basically came from there, the AKC was in Halifax, still is in Halifax, and so they were just people who trained there, and the brown belts, they did a pretty good job based on what they knew and what they could do themselves, and they inspired a lot of people. They had good work ethic. They inspired good work ethic with people, and they did the best they could.
Yeah, certainly. I'm sure they did. It's it'd be unfathomable nowadays to have somebody who has less than at least the Sho-dan, that's going to open up a club somewhere, take on students and the like. So, yeah.
Could you imagine if we were trying to teach at our dojo now when we were orange and brown belts or green belts? Like we could never attract the people today with that.
Yeah, but I guess back then the pickings were a bit slimmer, right? There weren't as many schools and clubs, and like you said earlier, David, the brown belts were like gods.
Yeah. Well, it's saturated now. There's everybody is a black belt now, and so if someone came into town and put up a shingle and said, "Oh, I've been training for 3 years as a and I've got my third Q," and I don't think it'd be very successful. It wouldn't matter where you went.
So here's a question I like to ask as many people as possible on this when I have the opportunity to do so with this podcast. The question is, in your opinion, what does a Sho-dan mean to you? And should there be a minimum age to achieve that rank?
I think the Sho-dan is someone who is just starting to learn karate. They come to a point where they've mastered, or at least have a certain skill level with basic ideas and basic movements, and they have attained a certain skill level that they are able to maybe apply and change and adapt to changing situations. Whereas someone who has not reached that level is struggling to connect the dots between one situation to another situation, and they haven't made that gap, or they haven't been able to make that leap. So I would say that a Sho-dan is someone who is basically, and I think I heard Sensei Higashi say this once, now that you're Sho-dan, you're teachable. So, and I've kind of always held that same belief, and that I kind of maintain that feeling.
So do you both share the same opinion on that?
I think that Sho-Dan, to me, and I know that you put a lot of years in to get to the level of Sho-Dan, but to me, it's almost like a white belt. You're starting on your venturing on, and I mean, even 40 years of karate, and had some wonderful instructors, like our head instructors. Soroka Sensei was my first, and I've had Sensei Higashi, Sensei Kutagawa, Sensei Tanzade. I've had some wonderful, wonderful instructors, and many times I still feel like a white belt. Even with all the training, there's just so much to learn, and it's interesting.
Sorry, to answer the second part of your question, as far as the age goes, I say that people are mature at different ages, so it's difficult to say. I think it's something you need a certain amount of maturity to be able to have the Shodan, hold the Shodan level. So, it could be 14 for some, it could be 12 for some, it could be 16. Some people don't mature until they're in their 40s. So, yeah, so that's a tough one, but I would say it requires a certain amount of maturity, depending on, and that will depend on the individual.
So there's not a set age, like in some organizations you had to be at least 16, and other organizations it can be as young as 12 and or even younger in some cases, and it's based on skill, I think, at the younger age, if you're physically proficient to do the movements and the techniques.
Yeah, well, I can understand why they set an age parameter. I mean, because if you don't have an objective standard, it's pretty hard to qualify. So, that's fine. If they said 16 it is. It's 14, it's 12, and whatever you think, I'm good with it. My personal feelings is that if, person has maturity, attained a certain amount of maturity, then, they can be the Shodan. But if they don't, then, that's, to me, that's a fundamental requirement.
What would you say is your, a question for each of you, either together or individually? What would you say is your proudest martial arts moment or achievements throughout your careers, or it could be what would be your most prominent eureka moment or sudden realization about something within the martial arts?
Yeah, to me, I was happy, and it's funny how when you have a success at something, at the time it seems important, and then a year later it doesn't seem as important. So it's hard for me to really answer that question, because when at the time something seems really significant and important, and then 10 years later it's trivial. I've had a lot of good moments. I enjoyed some of the competitions. Some of the best competitions where I learned the most were ones I did the worst, where I had the worst results. Some of the times when I've had a very successful competition, I knew it was empty. I knew it was hollow. It didn't feel right. Okay, so when you're given an award, it's important at the time. It feels good. You're being recognized, and you're being acknowledged. But nothing really takes place in a vacuum, in that there's a lot of people behind you, supporting you and helping you. So, you know, when you make an award, you know, you're just a small part of it. And so it's really hard to nail down what would be the best moments of my life, I guess, in karate world, is because everything just flows together.
I'm kind of feeling the same way, because there's been so many milestones, and all exciting and at different times. And I mean, some things I can't even remember the reason behind it, but there is one thing that stands out with me. Way back, I think I was a green belt, and there was a tournament, and I won the overall cup at the tournament or something. And I remember that was a turning point for me, thinking, wow, actually, and at that time I would have been fighting in a higher level, because it was always fighting up because you never had the numbers. And I remember winning that and feeling at that time, you know, I'm actually pretty good at this. So it was, it made me train even harder. And it was just something that really caught my attention. So, and then since then, there's been so many, you know, exciting moments because it's so long. It's really, you know, if it's something you did for a few years, but where it's been so long, there's just been one thing after another, and they were a while back. So it's hard to.
That's interesting that you know, as somebody who's competed at the World Championships, and you pick a local tournament as a green belt as the turning point, kind of, or the thing that's most prominent in your mind. That's pretty interesting. So what would you say, just building on this question, what would you say is the best lesson you've learned through the martial arts? Or I don't know about best, but you know, most prominent lesson, either about yourselves or about other people or about martial arts generally.
The best lessons I've learned through martial arts is just the sheer determination that you can do anything. Like, there's been a lot of really hard times through it. Like, for instance, when I changed from Shotokan to Chito-Ryu, I had to learn a whole new system in order to go for my black belt under Chito-Ryu. And that was driving back and forth to work with a manual and notes for a couple of years. And it's like, it was so much to learn. That was a huge, like, that was a huge thing I remember doing. And I
think there really is something about determination. You know, it's not just a platitude to say that, you know, if you really work hard, you can get what you want. There really is something to that. That's real. Yeah. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, and I found I needed a lot of determination going through the years. I worked full time as a business tax collector in the city with 3 children, and running our club and preparing for tournaments, because I had 2 children when I competed in Australia, in Fukuoka. Those 2 for sure. Those were big tournaments, and I had 2 young children, like maybe 6 months and 20 months, because they were close together. So it took a lot of grit and determination and planning to prepare for those kind of things. Yeah, that stands out in my mind. And then I don't know if this runs into it, but as a coach of the Canadian team, it was also all of the preparation and everything that I had to do just to get to these tournaments, because of the fact that I had 3 small children. And sometimes when I look back, it's kind of amazing, you know, some of the stuff that I did to get through that. Now, mind you, I worked for the city of Dartmouth. They've since amalgamated, and I had great support from them, and I had a few leave of absences over the years, you know, short leaves for training and leaves for coaching. So they were very, very supportive. Yeah.
So this grit and determination, do you think that's something that's was always within you, or do you think that's something that was trained into through your martial arts training sessions, I guess?
Well, martial arts had a big part to do with it, I think.
I think everybody has to. I think everybody has that. they just need to be they need to be motivated and encouraged. If they're encouraged the right way, they will find that. And I think that's part of our personal journey is finding that, finding what motivates you and what makes you click and makes you achieve what you don't think you could have achieved. I think that's all part of our journey.
Given everything that you've achieved, and I'm sure, you know, it was, as you've already alluded to, there's a lot of hard work and grit and determination involved in it. You know, what would you say has kept you involved all these years? Like for you, David, it's been over 40 years now, and about actually 50 years almost. I should say, not 40 years, 50 years.
40 for me, yeah.
Yeah, 40 for you, Theresa. Yeah, sorry, my math wasn't that great there. But yeah, like, that's a long time to be dedicated to something. And I know now, like, you've kind of doubled down on it. You became a full-time instructor more recently than when you first started. So you didn't have as much of that youthful exuberance as you would have had back in the 70s and so on. That, yeah, I'm going to start a club, but it was later in your karate career that you decided to do that, and I'm to do it full time. I mean, I'm curious as to what keeps you involved. What has driven you to do that?
Well, what else is there to do?
That's not true.
You're right. That's not true. Yeah, like I said before, what the reasons for starting karate and are not the same for the reasons that I stay into it. Some days it's hard. Sometimes it's difficult to go to the club. You know, if you're tired out, or if you're not, if you're not in a good frame of mind, it's hard to do. But I always, when I leave, when I get there, and when I'm doing it, I feel good in there. And when I leave, I'm always feel I'm glad I came. So I know that will be there. If I'm having a bad day and I'm on my way to the club, I don't want to go to the club for some reason. I don't want to go to the club, but I do know that once I get there and once I train or once I finish the class or something, I'll be glad I did. So that keeps me going, having that knowledge that's there for me.
Yeah. And for you, Theresa, same answer, or?
Pretty well the same. And well, we both support each other because we've been through, it's quite a journey. I mean, it's been our whole life together. And yeah, we're supportive of each other. Sometimes one of us is way up here and the other one's down here, or we kind of meet in the middle, but if we both are able to talk it through and support each other because of our experiences. And, know what he's dealing with. If I wasn't involved with karate, I wouldn't understand it all, but because we understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's almost like it's a, for those of us who are in this world, it's difficult sometimes for those who are outside to understand. There's sub-level of understanding that kind of comes with it.
Yeah,
it's difficult to articulate.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I was going to say it's difficult to articulate, but it's certainly there. And sorry, you were saying?
I was going to say we've committed our whole life to it. We've been involved at every level as an athlete, as coaches, as instructors, as officials. We're and also we've both been involved with Karate Nova Scotia and various other levels all as well, like the executive and stuff over the years. So we've certainly given a lot of time to it. Sometimes when you reflect on it, you think, wow, there was a lot of, we didn't miss kids' birthdays and things like that, but there was a lot of missed events because we were at tournaments, parties and different things that we'd show up at, when we finally get home and everything. But we've certainly given a lot of time to it over the years.
Yeah. Would you say that you had a favorite technique or a favorite concept that you either like to perform or like to teach?
Yeah, that's it depends on the context. If we're teaching sport karate or if we're teaching, you know, now these days. When I was younger, I was really interested in kumite, so more interested in kumite. But as I got older, I've become more and more interested in kata. So now my a lot of my training kind of focuses, teaching training focuses on that. We still teach kumite, but my passion more is towards kata. So that's where I kind of really I enjoy the most now.
Right. And for you, Theresa, any favorites that you have? What was your go-to when you were competing in kumite?
They don't even do it so much anymore. Well, not so much. Straight in front kick. Yeah.
Front kick.
Yeah. Which that's how things have evolved so much. Back in our day, we did do roundhouse body, head, and everything, but front kick was quite prevalent back in the early years, wasn't it? It's not something you see a lot today, but hardly at all. But it's certainly something you seen back then.
A lot to do with the equipment now. The covering on the foot kind of impedes the front kick a lot. So.
And we didn't have any coverings. All we had was a little thing on the hands.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like we didn't have chest protectors, legs. No. Oh, we did have a mouth guard. That's thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a time too back when there was they didn't like the roundhouse kick too much in the early years. Roundhouse kick was it was stipulated in some combative rules that the roundhouse kick had to be performed with the ball of the foot, which is very difficult to do when you're you're doing exceeding high speed with spontaneity. So it kind of it didn't evolve as fast. Like it wasn't used a lot for that reason, because most people, it's more natural to use the instep, top of the foot, and there was a lot of things like that, rules like that, kind of crazy little rules that, and I think it hurt the use of the roundhouse kick for a time there.
So also when you don't have the padding on your feet and you catch an elbow when you're doing a roundhouse, it's not it's not a fun day. No.
Yeah. And one other thing that I always teach the kids, that is something that I've always found successful for me, when we're fighting and you're in combat and you stop for a second, and the match is still going on, but there's a stop for a second, I always threw things where, everybody kind of now they stop and they step back, but you're ready and you're going, and there's just a little bit of a lull and you throw that jab or you throw something. And I always encourage our kids to do that. They kind of stop. I'm like, don't stop. You know what I mean? There's a lull, but that's your opportunity to score. And that's something I always liked, and it worked for me. And I try to pass it on through coaching. And some kids get it, and it really works for them, and others.
Yeah. Constant pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Putting the pressure on you. Very good. Yeah, I was always a fan of the front kick, but yeah, to you, it's or to your point, it's not nearly as popular now in competition. Not that I could much, but when I did, that was kind of my move, was the front kick.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question then about tradition. We're talking about how things have kind of changed from traditionally, even just using the front kick as an example. Traditionally it was a common technique, but now it's kind of changed. Along those same lines, what are your thoughts on the importance of tradition in training? And by that I mean, all the ceremonial things, the titles and the bowing and all of those sorts of things. Are they? Do you think they're a critical component to understanding the martial art that you're training, or do you think it's, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the tradition connects us to the culture where it came from. So I think it's an important element to foster and maintain, to kind of keep connected with the roots of karate, or at least the where it came from, its origins. So I think as a sport, it's probably less so important to maintain that these traditional elements, but as certainly within the context of the dojo and the hierarchy of the dojo and the style organizations, I think it's an important element that you have the sensei, you have the senpai, you have this infrastructure, this technical infrastructure, and I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. I think all that's very important, and we do maintain that in our dojo because our traditional training is really, really important because not everybody is into the sport karate. We have quite a big group at our group that are, and they always have been for years because we've both been so involved. But there's a lot of clubs that are around that are still really quite traditional with not a lot of people involved in sport karate.
So they're more geared toward traditional than the sport. That's what you're saying.
There are some.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. There are clubs. I think there's quite a few clubs that practice that don't practice the preparation for sports. So I guess that qualifies them as traditional clubs. Yeah.
I think it would all depend on your instructors because there are a lot of instructors that hadn't gone the route that we have. Being athletes ourselves and coaches and everything and officiating, so we kind of have the whole package there in terms of karate and what you can do. But a lot of there are some that their instructors may not have competed, and so they tend to teach the traditional karate, and they have smaller numbers that come out, for various reasons. But there still is a lot of traditional karate, and I consider us very traditional as well, but also with the sports aspect added to it.
Yeah. I think they're clear, distinct. They're becoming more distinct now. The sport and the traditional karate. They're becoming separate entities, which I think is part of the evolutionary process since my time anyway, is where they were more or less the same. They were the same. They existed within the same framework and structure. But now the evolution is taking place, and the sport is becoming is involved in one side and in a separate way from traditional karate. So that's probably one of the biggest things that's taken place, at least over my time, is the separation of these two. Same as I guess you could make the analogy with in Japan at the prior to the turn of the 20th century, the sword arts were all the same. Sword arts, but they broke and separated into kendo, which is more like a competition oriented, and then they have iaido. But at one point, they were all together as one discipline.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a continuum, I guess, and to your point about the evolution, yeah, because when it was what's called karate now, when it was first conceived, I guess it was all about self-protection. Now it's moved over the years. It moved into more of a self-perfection kind of thing, and now there's a sport aspect of it, and almost call them three different categories. even though they're all called the same thing. They're all called karate, but it's but they can be taught and learned and expressed in three very different ways.
Yeah.
And, yeah, it's interesting. So on the sport karate side of it, I mentioned earlier that you know, or acknowledged earlier that, you know, for the first time in the history of the Olympics, karate was a demonstration sport. What are your, do you have any thoughts on the future of karate? You know, as a result of this, like, do you think Olympic karate or sport karate is a good thing for the art, or is it something that's complementary, or is it something completely separate, like we were saying before about the continuum?
Well, that's. I think. I think there's a complementary relationship there. I think there's certainly been over the years the karate, there are organizations and styles that completely shy away from competition. However, they have enjoyed the notoriety that sport karate has provided. So they have harvested those fruits, so to speak. So and in the same way, I think the two can coexist. I think they can work together. I think the sport can be can complement the traditional, and I think likewise. Although their training will have to be differentiated quite significantly. Particularly, the sport will have to, of course, emphasize more athletic training, whereas the traditional karate might emphasize more finer skill development, or I don't know. You know, they may. It will have to be different for sure.
Yeah. Theresa, your thoughts as somebody who has competed at the pinnacle before the Olympics?
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I'd be curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
I hope that karate, you know, makes it back into the Olympics at some point. I hope, because I think watching it was like very, very exciting, and both the kumite and the kata. We really enjoyed watching it. We were away and we didn't have internet, so we watched it after the fact. But no, it's fantastic, and it's just so inspiring to see the strength and the, you know, just like you said, the determination of the athletes. And I hope that we do continue to see it. And of course, the traditional is important too. But like you said, there are all the karate dojos and stuff have benefited from having it, in me at the Olympics for it. Yeah.
And there's a lot of politics at that level, so yeah. I don't know the reasons why they won't be back, or at least they made the decision, and they made it fairly earlier that it wouldn't be a sport in Paris in 2024. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I'm not privy to those discussions, but it's unfortunate. I think it would have been nice to see it continue, and maybe in the future it will come back.
I hope it does too. Yeah. I think that karate made a great showing. Mm-hmm. I think, lots of, talked to a lot of people that watched it and were really pretty excited by it. Like, in Nova Scotia, because obviously we're not traveling right now, but Nova Scotia seemed very, very interested, and a lot of people took the time to watch it, and there was lots of discussions, not so much in person, but in groups,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, and especially, well, I guess from both of your perspectives, but I was going to say, for David as a WKF, Class A official judge, there was a bit of controversy around the very last match, the gold medal match, where the gentleman from Iran won after being knocked out.
Right.
And there's two sides of it. I don't know enough about the rules to know, to have a strong opinion either way, but it would seem as though he kind of leaned into a technique and got tagged and he won that way. And a lot of people were actually quite upset. This reflected poorly on karate as an activity, not just a sport, but the art overall. Any thoughts on that? I'm sure you've had some discussions.
Oh, yeah. Well, athletes at that level are very smart. They know the rules inside out. And had I would have called it differently. I would have made a different call than the referee did there. But let me say that the athletes, had he got up before the 10-second clock expired, he would have been facing 4 different scenarios, 3 of which would not have been good for him.
Yeah.
He could have been penalized he could have got a score against him.
Yep.
That he could have been penalized for exaggeration. He could have been penalized for mubobi, or he might have even got his opponent a contact penalty, right? But then he would have had to continue the fight. And he was down. He was down, and it was clear that the Saudi player was dominating at that point. He was clear. So in his mind, and this is my thinking, in his mind, he knew he was going to lose that fight. When he got hit, that was an opportunity for him to win. So if he got up before the 10-second rule, he would have had to continue the fight, plus taking a penalty, or his best scenario was that his opponent would get a penalty, right? So he doubles down on the 10-second rule, he stays down. So at that point, there's only 2 things that can happen, okay? You've got him getting disqualified for mubobi, which is self-endangerment.
Yep.
Or you've got this the scenario which actually unfolded, whereas he loses, he wins by disqualification. Okay, so that's how I saw it. He looked at the scenario. He looked at the fight that was happening. Knew he was going to lose, and so he doubled down on the 10-second rule and stayed down for the call.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that share that same opinion. Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't know enough about the rules and whatever. From what I saw, I thought that he either purposefully or unintentionally put himself in harm's way, and yeah, it was unfortunate. I thought it was a mubobi for sure, but
yeah, I had a very similar call at the last tournament I had went to in Santiago, Chile in 2019. It was the last Series A tournament I attended. There was a local Chilean fighter, pretty good level, but he's not international level, but probably good provincial level. He was fighting a competitor from Europe, very high level competitor, and I was refereeing the match, and it became very clear early in the match that the Chilean competitor was outclassed. He couldn't move against the European without him, scoring on him. So at a point in the match, the Chilean competitor takes a kick to the face, and it's not a hard kick, right? And it was clear in my mind it wasn't a hard kick. So, and he goes down, and he stays down for the 10 seconds. And so I knew he just wanted to get out of there. He did not want. That was his only chance to win. And so I called it, and when I come back, I called it as a mubobi, and so
Well, then again, to be fair, it's easy to judge through a screen. It's different to be there and all of those things. But yeah,
hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I know there was and still is, I guess, a bit of controversy surrounding that. But no, appreciate your insights on that. It's the first time I've had this opportunity to talk about it since the Olympics. So appreciate your insights there. So my next question is regarding styles, and this I appreciate your insight on this because you both trained in several different styles of karate. Would you say that our style's relevant outside dojo? Is it, is a good karate dojo that's say a Shotokan or Chito-Ryu or Wado or whatever? Are they all basically of similar value, or do you think that there are material differences between different styles?
I think I think the differences are nuances. That's they're subtle. They're so subtle. Now that being said, some people may be more suited to the curriculum of some styles, and some people may be more suited to the curriculum of other styles. So, but as far as quality goes, I'd say they're all of equal value. There's no one that's any superior that has any monopoly on knowledge or skill. And again, and as you probably know, it's all individual. It's what they put into it. If they put a lot into it, if somebody is doing Shito and they're kind of wishy-washy, well, their karate's going to be like that, or Cheeto, or whatever style you do. If you don't commit to it, if you don't give it its 100%, that's what you're going to end up with. So, yeah, I don't think any style has a monopoly on merit or quality or skill or knowledge for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Theresa, your thoughts?
Well, for me, and I've had the opportunity to do 3 different styles. There's things I liked about all the styles, but overall, I think your basics, regardless of what style you're in, good basics right from the very beginning is important. And I learned something from every style, which has helped me with everything as an athlete, as a coach, even as an official, because you have so. For me, I'm happy that I did all 3 styles because it gives you a different perspective than if you just trained in one style. So, and like I said, all had something to offer. I've had some fantastic instructors, and
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you say the way you just did, because well, we all love an echo chamber, right? I have the exact same kind of position on that. Is that yeah? There's the whole analogy about climbing another mountain to see a view of the one that you're on. It's a similar thing. So perspective is everything, for sure. Related to that, though, it's a question I checked in with you about earlier. Regarding styles and I guess people that have been in a given style or a given organization for a long time, and they decide to leave and either start their own style or at least their own organization. You get different lineages and a lot of different styles of karate and other arts as well. Just curious, any thoughts on why do you think people decide to ultimately, after investing decades into something, they decide to leave and do something else or create something else of their own?
Yeah, we've seen this unfold through the organizations I've been aligned with. I've seen it from the outside, looking at organizations that friends of mine have been involved with. But my perspective is that karate was a very cultural tradition in Japan, and it was typically things are typically handed down from generation to generation. Whether it's a sword making business, or whether it's a corner store, or whether it's a restaurant, they're typically passed from one generation to the next. And that works when you have real property, when you have tangible assets. But when you have intellectual property, it's a little harder to do. So what we found in karate organizations is we find situations where when the soke-ship, I guess, for lack of a better word, is handed to the next generation, there are lots of senior students who have more seniority and more experience than the new head of the style. So I think this has been the source of a lot of friction within the styles, and I think it's been a cause, or at least been an underlying factor to a lot of the separation and the breaking up and forming of new styles. That I think is one factor, and of course you can't say enough about people's personal preferences and differences. That's another factor too. That's to me that's you get two people in the room, you're going to have a difference of opinion, and that can be a source for you to work together, or it can be something that can be a wedge to drive between you. And sometimes people choose the latter.
Yeah. Any difference in thought on that, Theresa, or are you in lockstep there?
Yeah, pretty well.
Yeah. So it's like, I guess at the origination of a style, you have the soke, you have the O-sensei, and then you have the soke, the family, the one who inherits it. So yeah, and I can see this even in the business world. If you're working for a family-run business and the founders retire and the kids, the next generation, they take over, and yeah, so I can see from that perspective. So based on that, would you say it's mainly an ego thing, or do you think it's something else that's the driver behind it?
It's tough. I think there's some elements of ego with some people. I think there are. Sorry.
Our dog.
Yeah, I think there's elements of ego, and that's one layer of, and then there's sometimes it's financial, and yeah, I think there's probably a separate reason for every break that's ever occurred. I'm sure there's some situations are going to be unique, and some are going to be the same. But yeah, maybe ego, maybe financial.
Yeah, I would put a wager on it being one or the other, or if not both of those two categories that you just mentioned. Yeah,
that's probably fair.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but it's, I guess, human nature. So if you were, looking back on your martial arts careers, if you were to do it over again, is there anything you would do differently, or what do you know now that you wish you knew sooner? And the answer might be nothing. But if there is something, then I'd be curious to know what that would be.
Well, I guess the hindsight is always 20/20 in those situations. So, yeah, no, I can't say there's anything that I would really. Yeah, no, I can't really say there's too much. I probably would probably do it the same. Yeah, because I know that every step I took, I learned something. So to change something would mean changing what I am now, and changing what I am now would not make me able to make that decision. I don't know if that's making any sense, but yeah, everything I've done, every step I've took up to this point is put me where I am now, and changing it would mean changing who I am now. And sometimes I like what I am, sometimes I don't. But for the best part, 9 times out of 10, I think I'm okay. So I think I'll just leave it as it is.
Very safe answer. Good. Theresa, same question for you. Like and I don't want to try and put any words in your mouth, but you mentioned before about, you were working full time, you had young children, you were heavily involved in the training and the competing and teaching and all these other things. Looking back, is there anything you would have done differently there, or are you the same as David with it's what made you now?
Yeah. I probably wouldn't have changed much. I'm thankful for all the opportunities. It didn't come without a lot of hard work. Yeah, we've through karate, whether as an athlete, official, or a coach, we've been all over the world. Yeah, we've been everywhere. We've had I've been to Japan 5 times. Dave's been 4 times. We've done lots of training and stuff there. And as for his officiating, I was lucky enough, because our kids are grown up, to get to do a lot of the traveling with them. And we have traveled all over the world. We've met great people. Yeah, I don't think I would change too much, really. Yeah, it's like I said, lots of just a kind of funny story that came to my mind today. We didn't miss important events. We celebrated them where we were and stuff like that. But there were times, like I can remember back in the day when I had a few kids and we live outside Halifax, and having a Nova Scotia team training. And I remember joking with another one of the ladies with me, and we said, here it is, Mother's Day, and we're training in the field with cow patties. So, there's been lots of interesting things happen along the way, but overall, I really don't think I changed much. And as far as the styles go, I think I was lucky to have that opportunity to do 3 different styles. And that's really helped me with my perspective on a lot of different things. So, yeah.
Yeah. Good. So it's been time well spent.
Mm-hmm.
The 90 years combined.
Yeah, exactly.
Approximately 90 years combined.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's good.
I mean, it made me think about it. The fact that we were coming on, it really made me think a lot about it. And we've basically done this our whole life. We know not. I don't say we know nothing else. I still play soccer, and Dave bikes daily. We do other things, but karate has been our, main thing right through our bringing the children up, and still to this day. So I don't think I'd change it much, because we've had a lot of wonderful opportunities from it.
Excellent. Yeah. So what advice, given your wealth of experience and knowledge and so on about karate and about, managing a dojo and teaching and all of those things, what advice would you have for anyone who's looking to start the martial arts, either for themselves or say for their children or whichever? Are there things that you would recommend that they would look for?
Hang in there. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't take your I don't like to say failures, but take your setbacks in perspective. don't define yourself by your setbacks, and look at it as a opportunity to regroup and take stock. Yeah, just if you don't quit, don't give up. You know, whatever it is people do, whether it's karate, or whether it's if you're taking up competitive chess or whatever it is you do, whatever you take on in your life, is I give the same advice, because it's you don't know you never know what your capacity is until you've pushed yourself to that limit.
For you, Theresa, same question?
Okay, I'd say as far as your dojo goes, and like the teaching of in our dojo, and I'm just going to go with our past, experiences, is to treat everybody as equals and have no favorites. And I think that's really been a big part of our success. Like we've had like students, we're teaching people as grandchildren now, and we're close to almost great grandchildren. So that we've had of all the parents in the past and stuff. And I think the big thing is treating everybody the same, meeting everybody in the same place. I mean, because every one of our students has something like a wonderful quality about them. So, and they have, we like all our students. There's something you like about every one of them, and I think you have to find that. Sometimes it's a little longer with some, but overall, and I think it's just making everybody feel welcome. And basically, if you treat everybody the same, I have said this before, that Dave treats his white belts as nice as he treats his black belts, and I think there's a lot to be said for that.
So be respectful is essentially what it comes down to. Yeah. So are there any red flags that you would advise people to look for if they're looking at a club or a school, karate school, dojo, whichever, to join? And it doesn't have to be karate; it could be anything else. Are there things that you would advise someone to say, if the person does this, or if you see this, keep going?
Okay. Yeah. What I always tell parents when they come in, I say that whether they're adults or especially parents when they have children, because you're taking your children there, I always tell them, don't go to the first karate club that you come across. It's important for you to go in and sit and watch your children and see how your instructors interact and how they teach you, how they interact and, how they treat your children, because you just don't take them to the first place and leave them there. So and if they come, and if they come and our dojo is not that choice, they see somewhere else, then they've made an informed decision for their children, and I think that's really important. And so I always tell people that, and if you have an opportunity to go train somewhere else, go train somewhere else too. And just so you can have that feeling of, wow, I am at a really good dojo where I'm, we're treated fairly, and things like that. I've had some things over the years where I haven't been treated fairly, but for me, way back, in time, being a female, but for me, that only encouraged me more. For some people, it could be the turning point. People could walk away, but anytime I felt if I was mistreated or, not, I can't even. Anyway, for me, anytime that something happened that I felt I was being pushed down, that only encouraged me to rise up. So for me, it worked well for me in life in general when things like that happen. I rise up, but there are people that walk away. So I guess I was just lucky in that way.
Yeah, I would say to anybody that's looking to start to train karate or anything, talk to the people in the community. And what kind of a reputation do they have? What do they, have they just opened up their big shop in the last 3 months? Have they, do people go in and do they continue to train? Do they have a high dropout rate. If there's a high dropout rate, there's probably a good reason for that. If they have a good retention rate, that's a good sign. How does people have a good sense of them of when they meet someone if it's a good person or not? You have a good 9 times out of 10 anyway. I think you have a pretty good judge of character with your initial meeting with somebody. So that would be my advice to anybody who's looking to start a new club or to start training.
Do your homework is do your research, I guess. Do your homework.
Yeah, sure.
It's important, especially when children are involved.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now
yeah. Excellent. Well, we've covered a lot of items here. Really genuinely appreciate your time and your insights. Is there anything you wanted to add that we haven't covered, or want to share, like where people can find you, your dojo, that kind of stuff?
Oh no, we're good. I just want to thank you for taking the time to reach out to us. That was really nice and thoughtful, and I appreciate your project and what you're doing here. It gives a lot of us old fellows a place to feel and a time to feel like we contributed something. So. Yeah, we appreciate what you're doing, and I hope you continue with it.
Yeah, and I feel the same way because it's the last couple of years have been really tough all around, and it's for us we're getting like in the middle of downsizing and everything, so we're just like Dave mentioned to me, and I'm like, oh okay, like that, and I'm not usually a humming and hawing person, but it's just. And then I stopped right dead in my tracks and I said, well, why wouldn't we do this? This is an opportunity to talk about something that we're both passionate about. And, you don't get that opportunity very often. So it's not only is it something we're passionate, we've spent our whole life doing it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the fact that you said yes. And I appreciate, our mutual friend Aaron, for suggesting that I reach out to you and everything, and I'm really glad I did. It was a genuine pleasure speaking with you, and as a fellow East Coaster, it's a treat to speak with my people from time to time. So that's
great.
That's
sometimes when it's finished, I think there's probably things we didn't talk about, but we talked about a lot, so that's really good.
Yeah, well, we covered a lot, but I'll leave this for you. If there's anything else that you really feel you wanted to talk about, we could do this again if you want.
Yeah, that's all right. No, for us, it's been no. But like you said, we've had just wonderful opportunities. Yeah, and we've met such great people. That's in all the styles and. You'll meet the odd one that's not so great, but overall, karate people in general have, it's been great.
Yeah. It's a global community. It's really, neat thing to be a part of. So.
And I think when it comes to the karate community, I mean, the degrees of separation are pretty small with people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you both very, very much for your time, and appreciate your insights again, like I said, and I hope, I more than hope, I know that there's going to be a number of people that really enjoy hearing your insights and your stories and those kinds of things. So thank you for being a part of this initiative that I have going here. So really,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much
for doing it.